See, the problem with today's society is a lot of different things. Well, the main problem is everyone's wanting to look at the whole picture of something, rather than pay attention to every little detail that makes up that big picture. We can see this in bread. You guys are probably wondering, what's this guy going to talk about? Bread, how to eat bread, is Subway's bread really fresh? All these different things you guys probably think I'm going to talk about. But really, I'm not going to talk about those dumb things. What I'm going to talk about today is the United States government. Then I will talk about Pitch Perfect, one of my favorite movies. And finally, I will talk about one of my favorite books, The Hunger Games. I will be talking about how all these little tiny bits and pieces of every individual character, or every individual piece, make up a big and central message, or a big picture, or a loaf of bread. The United States government is divided up in many different parts. The first part everyone decides is the loaf of bread. The loaf of bread is the main part. Now, people view the loaf of bread as to be the President of the United States. And then the sub-slices, or sub-departments of the bread, are Congress, and then the individuals are the senators and the people. Well, today we will look at how everyone likes to blame the big picture of something. For instance, for any problem the United States has, who's the first person they blame? The President of the United States. Little do they know, it's really not his fault. The President does not have that much power in anything. He is in fact just a little tiny piece of that whole picture. But in fact, people like to view him as the whole picture, but he really isn't. See, the senators and the people are actually the ones that have the more power, simply because the people of the United States inspire senators and representatives to make laws and have these laws affect the United States. These different laws that they have affect the whole United States, and that is what the big picture is. Instead of really, the president is not the big picture. He's simply a little piece in this whole big picture. One of my favorite movies, Pitch Perfect, we can view Fat Amy as the whole loaf of bread. I mean, literally, she's kind of, you know. As Fat Amy is portrayed as the whole loaf of bread, she basically makes the movie how it is. She's basically the protagonist and is the often funny character that likes to make everyone think positive. Another thing we can see is the Bella's performance. Their whole performance is based off tradition, and what they do not realize is that every individual person in that whole team makes a difference. Their leader, Aubrey, no one really likes her, but at the end we do like her because she lets everyone contribute their own ideas into the performance. See, at first everyone criticized them because they kept doing the same performance over and over again. But Aubrey decided at the end to give Becca a chance and let her come up with some of her own ideas. And this allowed them to actually win the championship. They won the championship simply because every individual piece and every individual person in that performance helped make it a great picture. So Fat Amy really wasn't the whole loaf of bread. She was in fact a crumb. It's hard to believe, right? A little crumb? No. She was actually a little crumb. But see, everyone was a crumb. It was not just Aubrey was not just the whole performance. It was everyone working together that made the whole performance and how they won their championship. Finally, today we'll talk about my favorite book, The Hunger Games. Now, we can see this through The Hunger Games simply because The Hunger Games is not just one whole piece. It's actually a whole bunch of different little tiny parts that make up how the turnout of The Hunger Game ends. You see, at the beginning we find out that Katniss Everdeen lives in Poor District 12. They are literally scrambling and trying to do anything to get a little tiny crumb or even a loaf of bread. But see, the problem is that she will then use those skills that she used throughout her life in The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games is where it comes all down into effect. That piece of bread she once thought of as to be her life now depends on how the results of the Hunger Games turn out. You see, there are many different pieces that make up the Hunger Games. First of all, there are the victors and the contestants in the Hunger Games that make up how the outcome of the Hunger Games will turn out simply by who will win, who is better, who is the strongest. And then we also see the people of the Hunger Games like the gamekeepers, the ones who make advantages and disadvantages for their favorite components and their different favorite champions in the Hunger Games. We also see President Snow as a little piece of this whole picture, simply because he has a hatred for Katniss by the end of the movie, simply because she is showing rebellion. Now, all these different things that make up the Hunger Games make up one big picture and do not simply show how one affects each other, but simply because the Hunger Games is not always what it seems. May the odds be ever in your favor, but really, who decides what odds are in whose favor? You never thought about it that way. So every little piece actually make up a slice, and all those different slices make up the loaf of bread. Today we have talked about bread. I know, boring, right? Well, it's pretty better than talking about how Subway is eat fresh or how bread is even made. We don't want to talk about that. So today we talk about the United States government. Politics isn't really that interesting, but when I talk, I make it interesting. Then we talk about Fat Amy and how she really isn't the whole loaf of bread, even though it may seem she is. And then we finally talked about my favorite book, The Hunger Games, and how every individual piece of that book and every individual person in that book helped make up the effect and the turnout of the Hunger Games. So what should you get out of this today, you might be wondering? Well, start looking at things in detail and not worry about the whole outcome of it. Look at things individually. Don't look at the whole big picture, and try and express yourself individually instead of trying to be like everyone else and express the whole big picture. So don't be like Fat Amy. Try and be like a crumb. You don't want to be a whole loaf of bread because everyone's just going to concentrate on you. Try and be a crumb hidden in that piece of bread and look at the different ways you can blend in.